Welcome to the SportsCapping.com podcast with free handicapping advice, odds insights, picks, and predictions to help you beat the sportsbook. And now your hosts, Jack Jones and Brandon Lee.
You're tuned into the SportsCapping.com free pick podcast. It's your host, Jack Jones, back with another week of winners. We're heading into Week 3 NFL and Week 4 college football. Brandon Lee and I have delivered back-to-back 5-1 weeks. Brandon went 3-0 last week. He hit Pitt in college football, the Falcons in the NFL, and a 6-point teaser on the Falcons and Chargers. I went 2-1, hitting Purdue in college football, my 10-point NFL teaser, Rams, Chiefs, and Giants, but I lost my free pick on the Saints. For our only loser, we're now 97, 59, and 6 over our last 30 football podcasts, 62.2% winners. We're 11-5 combined through the first 3 weeks of this football season. Having a great year. Brandon, welcome back to the show, and congrats on a second straight 5-1 week.
Hey, man, glad to be back and appreciate it. It's a great time of year. We got football back in action and all you can eat shrimp at Red Lobster. So,
oh yeah, man, that's one of our favorite things to do there. So definitely we'll be taking advantage of that for a couple months.
Yeah, we got some more visits to come.
Oh yeah, share some good insight too while we load up on some shrimp. We know you guys want the winners, so we like to keep it short and sweet for you guys. We have 6 more free picks, with 2 in college football and 4 in the NFL. We'll start out with our free picks in college football for Saturday. Brandon, what's yours?
Yeah, I'm going to go to one of the biggest games on the board and take Texas A&M and Alabama to go over the total of 61. I think this game is easily going to get into the 70s and maybe even the 80s. I was on the over 70 last week in the Alabama-Ole Miss game. Unfortunately, that one finished with 69 points, despite being halfway to the total at the end of the first quarter when it was 28-7, and sitting on 56 points at the half. I'm still shocked that the Rebels were completely shut down after scoring on their first drive. Either way, it's not going to keep me from taking the over in this one. Alabama is a team that I was looking forward to betting the over on, as I'm confident this is going to end up being the most prolific offense in the Nick Saban era. Alabama currently leads the country at 56.7 points per game. The rushing numbers are pretty on par with what we've seen from previous Crimson Tide teams, but the passing attack is on a completely different level. Over the previous 3 seasons, their highest passing yards per game for a year was 227. Right now, they're just south of 310 yards per game. And the biggest thing to keep in mind is they've scored 17 points in the fourth quarter of their 3 games combined. Eventually they're going to have to play a full 4 quarters. And when they do, it's going to be crazy to see how many they can put up. All of this is a result of, the sophomore quarterback Tua. I think he's already locked up the Heisman Trophy. I got a lot of respect for Jimbo Fisher and, his ability to get his team ready to play. But I see this Texas A&M defense having no shot of slowing down this Alabama attack. The key here for me is, unlike Ole Miss, who really let us down last week, I believe the Aggies will put up more than 7 points, and I think they could actually get into the 20s and have the potential for even more. We already saw Texas A&M play an elite defense this year in Clemson. They put up 26 points against the Tigers, and they could have had a lot more than that. They missed 2 field goals and fumbled twice inside Clemson's 30-yard line. Fisher's going to have this offense ready to go. He's not going to be intimidated by Saban in that defense. I think Texas A&M is going to pull out all the tricks here to find the end zone, and I think this flies over the total of 61.
Yeah, man. How about that bad beat for Alabama over bettors last week, leading 49-7 at halftime?
It was a rough one.
Oh my goodness! I had 56 points, only needed 71. Only could get 13 points in the second half. But everyone was on the over that last week, it seemed like, and it was a brutal loss for those that were. And now we have a more reasonable number here at 61. And I think this will be a more competitive game than last week. So starters for both teams should play longer. That will help the over. I actually like Texas A&M plus 26 a little bit here too. which is why I believe it'll be a competitive game. Also like the over. Was impressed with Texas A&M's offense against Clemson. I mean, they had over 500 yards, and their quarterback had huge numbers against Clemson, over 400 yards passing, and pretty impressive against that defense. So it should be quite the quarterback duel in this one. Lean over, lean Texas A&M.
Yeah, I would definitely lead Texas A&M as well. I just can't get myself to bet against Alabama just quite yet because they've been laying some big numbers and covering every week. So
for sure, I don't know if I'll get there with Texas A&M yet, but we'll see. Definitely like the over with you though. I'm gonna go with Stanford -2 at Oregon this week with my college football free pick. This used to be a great rivalry with Stanford and Oregon, kind of trading blows year after year. But I don't think that's any longer the case. Stanford's dominated the last two meetings. They won 52-27 on the road as 3-point favorites in 2016, and then they won 49-7 at home as 9.5-point favorites last year. Now Stanford is only a 2-point favorite for this meeting, and odds makers are expecting a close game. I'm just not seeing it. Stanford's a legit contender to win the Pac-12. Cardinal have been tested already, and they've passed with flying colors. Beat San Diego State 31-10 as 14-point home favorites to avenge last year's loss to them, and they shut down USC 17-3 as 4.5-point home favorites. So the Cardinal have been battle tested, and they clearly have an elite defense after those two performances. Plus, star running back Bryce Love returns this week from a one-game absence to give their offense a boost. He hasn't quite been 100% yet, but I think that week off will certainly lead to him having his best game of the year here. No team has faced an easier schedule than Oregon through the first 3 weeks. They beat Bowling Green in the opener, beat Portland State in week 2. It's a Portland State team that's 1-13 dating back to last season. And then they barely beat San Jose State 35-22 last week as 42.5-point favorites. I mean, that effort's a big concern because San Jose State's one of the worst teams in the country. Could have been looking ahead to this game, but either way, a 13-point win against that team at home is really bad. The Ducks won't be – I don't think they're going to be prepared for the kind of effort they're going to get from Stanford. I mean, Stanford's going to hit them in the mouth here, and I think the lack of competition up to this point for the Ducks is really going to hurt them. Oregon's 3-12-1 against the spread their last 18 games following a win. Cardinal 5-1 against the spread their last 6 versus a team with a winning record. And the Cardinal are also 21-8-1 against the spread their last 30 games off an ATS loss. Mario Cristobal, the head coach of Oregon, 0-7 against the spread in home games, off a home game in all games he's coached. Definitely take David Shaw over Cristobal. Definitely take Stanford over Oregon in this one.
Yeah, I'm actually leaning towards taking the other side here. I think Oregon is better than people think. I think last week was a clear look ahead to this game. They've had it circled for a while. I also think Autzen Stadium is one of the more difficult places to get a win when the fan base is excited about this team. And not to mention this is a primetime game at night, which only adds to that home field advantage. I personally just don't trust Stanford on the road with the struggles they've had offensively. I know Bryce Love didn't play last week, but he wasn't anything special in the first 2 games. Through 3 games, the Cardinals have the 112th ranked rushing attack and are just 63rd in passing. That 14-3 win over USC doesn't look nearly as good after the Trojans were embarrassed 37-14 at Texas this past weekend. I know the defense has been great, but I think they played one of the most traditional offenses in the country in San Diego State, a USC team that lost a lot and was starting a true freshman at quarterback, and an FCS foe in UCS Davis. And one thing that really stands out to me, Texas, who gave up 34 points and 400 yards to Maryland, allowed fewer yards against USC than Stanford did. This Oregon offense is the best that Stanford will have faced to this point in the season. 2 years ago was not a close game. Justin Herbert wasn't in action. Oregon, didn't have their starting quarterback in last year's game. This Ducks team's putting up a lot of points and a lot of yards. I know that the competition has been weak, but I like teams that, are averaging 50 points a game and over 500 yards of offense. I don't care who they play. I also think the Oregon defense is better than people give credit for. I think they're going to feed off the home crowd. And I think they come into this one with a chip on their shoulder and get their revenge.
All right, we can't agree on them all. So, I get it as far as Oregon's definitely a better team with Herbert, and that is a concern for sure in this one for me. But I just think Stanford defensively so good that I don't think it's going to matter a lot. And I think Bryce Love has a big game. I don't think Oregon's defense is very good either. So,
yeah, we'll find out a lot about it. I mean, they're only giving up 2 yards a carry right now, so.
They played the easiest schedule in the country.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams that play an easy schedule and give up a lot more than 2 yards a carry.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We'll see what happens, though, on Saturday. Let's move on to the NFL. What do you got this week for the NFL?
Yeah, I'm going to stick to what's working here. I'm going to take another home team that's just under a touchdown favorite. This week it's going to be the Baltimore Ravens, who are anywhere from a 5 to a 6-point favorite. I'll go ahead and take him at 5.5. I got no problem with that, just in case the line moves. There's only maybe 1 or 2 5s out there. I do think it is going up to 6. And I think there's a big difference between 5.5 and 6 and like 5 and 5.5. So I would definitely recommend betting this early. I think there could be a lot of people hesitant to take the Ravens off that loss to the Bengals in week 2. Plus you got the Broncos coming into this game as one of 7 teams without a loss so far in 2018. I think what a lot of people are going to overlook, or at least forget to factor here, is that Baltimore's loss to the Bengals came in, one of the most difficult spots there is in the NFL scheduling wise. They had just, having to play on the road with just 3 days of rest. I think it's a big reason, or it was a big reason why I was on the Bengals in that game. And I think it had a lot to do with the Ravens getting down big early. Once they got settled in, I don't think there was any question they were the better team. You just aren't going to win many games with a -3 turnover differential. Also worth noting, they outgained the Bengals 425 to 373 and had an impressive 28 first downs in that contest. The key here is, that tough scheduling spot that Baltimore was in week 2 now turns into an advantage for them in week 3. Baltimore will now have 3 more days to prepare for this game than Denver will. That's a big time advantage. The rest, whether it be early or late, really helps a team, not only physically, but also in preparation for the opponent. I really like what I've seen out of Joe Flacco and the Ravens offense so far. I think the running game will come around, but Flacco's putting up big-time numbers. He was 25 of 34 for 236 yards and 3 scores against the Bills in week 1, and could have thrown for a lot more if it wasn't such a big blowout. He had some costly turnovers against Cincinnati, but threw for another 376 yards and 2 touchdowns. That gives him 612 passing yards through the first 2 games, which is almost double the 338 he had over the first 2 weeks of last season. I look for the passing attack to have a lot of success here against the Broncos defense. Derek Carr threw 32 passes against Denver last week and completed 29 of them. He ended up with 288 yards. The week before that, Russell Wilson threw for 298 yards against them. I'm also not the least bit sold on this Broncos team as a whole. I think they beat a couple of average, maybe even below average teams in the Seahawks and Raiders. Not to mention they could have lost both of those games as they trailed in the fourth quarter of each of them. I had my concerns when Denver brought in Case Keenum from Minnesota in the offseason. And in just 2 games, he's got more than half as many interceptions as he did all of last year. He was not very good at all last week against the Raiders. And I think this team is going to have a very difficult time moving the ball against the Ravens defense. I know C.J. Mosley might not play, which is a big loss, but I don't think it changes the outcome here. Broncos were just 1-7 on the road last year. This is their first road game of 2018, and I wouldn't be shocked if this turned into a blowout.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a Ravens spot. The extra time to prepare off that loss to the Bengals last Thursday, and the Broncos may not be as good as their 2-0 record would suggest. Number may be a tick too high for me. I lean that way. Kind of like the Falcons last week, lean that way, but number might just be a little bit too high. But the Falcons worked out for you, and I hope this one does too. I do expect it to be a defensive battle. I still think the Broncos have an elite defense. that I can keep them in this game. That is my biggest concern with backing the Ravens is the Broncos defense. I know the numbers. I know the numbers that Carr put up, but it was pretty good. And but they're still only giving up 339 yards per game. That's at least average so far this year. I do worry about that injury to C.J. Mosley, the quarterback of their defense. That being said, total does seem a notch too high for me. It's set at 44 points right now. Two pretty uninspiring offenses for a total that high. I think both defenses here definitely above average. Would still lean Ravens with you, Brandon, but I think I like the under 44 a little more.
Gotcha here. Yeah, I would be a little nervous there on the under, but I don't necessarily love the total at all here. I think Baltimore could score well into the 20s and maybe even more. I'm just not sold on Denver. And defenses typically play worse on the road than they do at home.
True. Yeah, that Carr performance last week was definitely pretty impressive. They had a good game plan there with a bunch of quick passes. I'm going to go with the Saints +3 at the Falcons this week. I think this is clear buy low opportunity here on the Saints. There were big expectations for them coming into the season. Many felt they were Super Bowl contenders. And they were priced like it the first 2 weeks. They were double-digit favorites against both the Bucs and Browns. Lost outright to the Bucs. Were fortunate to beat the Browns. But off two bad performances, we're now catching points with the Saints here as 3-point underdogs at the Falcons. I still believe this is one of the best teams in the NFL. Bucs and Browns clearly better than most expected. The Bucs followed up their upset of the Saints with another upset of the defending champion Eagles. And remember, the Browns tied the Steelers in overtime week 1. I didn't think the Browns would have the offensive firepower to keep up with the Saints last week, which is why I was on the Saints, but their defense was good enough. Man, their defense played real well. They probably should have won that game. The Falcons lost the Eagles back in week 1. Atlanta got in the win column last week in the 31-24 win over the Panthers, but the Panthers were a mash unit. With key losses along the offensive line, tight end, and linebacker. Yet the Panthers had the ball with the chance to tie in the closing seconds. The Saints are almost fully healthy here. I think this will be a real tough challenge for the Falcons. I believe the Saints are the better team right now because of their health. The Falcons are missing 3 of their best players in safety Keanu Neal, linebacker Deion Jones, running back Devonta Freeman. I don't think the Falcons have what it takes to beat the Saints without those 3 guys, let alone win by a margin, cover this 3-point spread. Quietly, the Saints have been a good road team. They're 14-5 against the spread their last 19 road games, and the Falcons are 5-24 against the spread their last 29 home games off a home win. Give me the Saints on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm going to once again lean the other way. Don't love disagreement, but this is just how I see this one. I didn't like the Saints last week as a big home favorite against the Browns. And I just didn't trust them after the performance against the Bucs, and no way am I taking them in this spot. I, like you, thought New Orleans was one of the better teams in the NFC coming into this year, but the results through the first 2 weeks suggest otherwise. I personally would much rather jump off the bandwagon too early than too late. The biggest thing I see with the Saints so far as to why they're not as effective as they were last year, it's the running game. After putting an emphasis on it last year and finishing 5th in the NFL at 129.4 yards per game, they haven't even reached that mark through the first 2 games of 2018. They had just 105 total yards against the Bucs and the Browns. Note that Cleveland gave up 159 rushing yards in their opener against the Steelers, and Tampa gave up 91 last week to the Eagles, with Philadelphia playing from behind for basically the entire second half of that game. I think a big reason for that is the suspension of Mark Ingram, who is out for the first 4 games. Either way, the high-powered run game that they had last year, I believe, was a big reason why they put up such better defensive numbers. So far, they have not been very good on that side of the ball. And as good as Drew Brees is, I think he's going to have a tough time keeping pace with Matt Ryan in this offense. Just as I predicted last week, Atlanta's offense came to life at home and did so against a very good Carolina defense. I also think there's value in this line. This is the same number we saw when, the Vegas odds makers put out the numbers for weeks 1 through 16 way back in the spring. I just don't think a field goal is enough given what we saw from the Saints to this point.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I definitely get it. I wasn't big on the Saints coming into the year because I took the Bucs, but I figured after a loss they would respond in a big way. Kind of disappointing they didn't, but I'm starting to believe the Browns defense had a lot to do with that. So here, I mean, the Saints are healthy except for Ingram. I get that point too, but they were trailing like the entire Bucs game, and I mean they were trailing for a majority of the Browns game last week too, or a big part of it, and so I don't think they've been emphasizing the run yet. I think they should a little more for sure because they're better when they do. I just think those injuries to those three players. I think those injuries of those three players for the Falcons are huge. I mean, without Freeman and without Jones and Neal, and I think that 1 week they were okay without him against the Panthers, but the Panthers were beat up, man, and I just think this week those injuries on defense, especially, the Saints are going to do whatever they want, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. We'll find out a lot here Thursday night when that Cleveland defense goes up against Sam Darnold. So I like the Browns in that one for anyone who listens to this early. But, if they struggle there or, then maybe they dominate, maybe I'll think a little differently here. But either way, I won't be taking the Saints.
Yeah, yep, understandable, man. Yep, we can't always agree. And, 2 weeks ago we didn't agree on, like, anything, and we still went 5-1. So that's the important thing. Let's give the listeners a couple of NFL teaser winners here for Week 3. Brandon, what's your favorite teaser?
Yeah, I'm going to do a 2-team 6-point teaser. I'm going to do the Chiefs and the Eagles. Both are 6.5-point home favorites. So here we're taking them from, having to win by a touchdown to just winning the game outright as the tease takes them down to like -0.5.
I like both of those. Definitely a lot of good teaser options this week, guys. I'm going to use one of yours. I'm going to go with the Eagles -0.5 and the Patriots -0.5 on a 6-point teaser. Patriots have been just dominant off a loss under Belichick, and the Lions obviously have all kinds of issues right now, especially on defense. The Eagles get Carson Wentz back this week, so I'm not a believer in the Colts just yet. So I think this will be a big, a great spot to back the Eagles here at home, especially just on the teaser line at least. So these two teams just have to win the game as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Carson Wentz and how that offense looks. I know, it might struggle a little early, but as good as him, he was playing at an MVP level before he got hurt, and it'll be interesting to see if they can click right away or if it's going to take some time.
Yeah, he might not be hitting on all cylinders week 1, but that defense should definitely give the Colts a lot of troubles.
Yeah, he plays well. That game could get ugly.
Mm-hmm. All right, Brandon, let the listeners know how you're doing this season and maybe where they can find you to buy your packages.
For sure, yeah. Coming off a profitable week in both college football and the NFL, including a 6-1 mark in the NFL, now hitting 59% over my last 162 in college football and 63% over my last 67 in the NFL. Going back to the start of 2017, I'm hitting 57% over all my premium football picks, and that's over 450 plays. You can find me at sportscapping.com/Brandon-Lee.html. And I've got a lot of premium packages and long-term subscriptions if you want to save some money. So get signed up and let's start winning some money.
Yeah, nice work, man. Great weekend in the NFL. I did not have a great weekend in the NFL, but I made up for it with a huge weekend in college football. I went 7-0 on Saturday. That highlighted an 8-3 weekend on the gridiron. 470 and 359 college football run long term. 88-61 NFL run long term. Number 3 ranked football capper last year. 30-day pass for $400. Give me a try for a month. That would be a right recommendation. Or save some extra money. Get my NFL and college football pass for $800. That'll get you all my premium football picks through the Super Bowl. Basically just the cost of 2 30-day packages there. So that'll be a big discount over the long term for you. You can find me at betfirm.com or hit me up on Twitter at betfirmsjack. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Leave a review if you like the show. That's going to wrap up this episode. Have a great weekend, everyone. Be sure to join us next week to discuss Week 4 NFL and Week 5 college football.
Thanks for listening to the SportsCapping.com podcast. For more free picks and predictions, be sure to visit us at SportsCapping.com.